Welcome back to another episode, all. Throughout this episode, we're going to be discussing the relationship between the gut and the brain of how it's associated with autism. I'm going to bring through a couple of studies. I'm going to be pointing out the cons in some of it as well as the pros. Both links to the studies I'll be reading through will be in the description. The first one is an article called Groundbreaking Research Reveals Definitive Association Between Gut Microbiome and Autism. I quote, "In a big reassessment study, scientists have found a definitive association between gut bacteria and autism spectrum disorder. The relationship between the gut microbiome and autism spectrum disorder has eluded the most brilliant minds for over 20 years, but new technology offers a ray of hope. In a groundbreaking study published in the scientific journal Nature Neuroscience, scientists claim to have made a definitive association between temporal changes in the gut microbiome, composition and observable traits, and symptoms of individuals with ASD. Employing a novel algorithm, the researchers delved into decades of research and confirmed an intricate relationship between the gut microbiome and ASD, paving the way for future advancements in therapy and treatment." End of quote. First of all, the first piece of criticism I have towards this is not all autistic people have gut problems. And there's non-autistic people who do have gut problems as well. So both autistic and non-autistic people experience this. So this can't be universally and only to do with autism. It mentioned about the symptoms associated with autism. So if it's caused by gut problems, doesn't this suggest that the symptoms are more to do with the gut and not actually autism? Because as lots of autistic self-advocates have said, they would like cures to things like meltdowns, for anxiety, depression, and the other things that they found problematic, but they don't quite want the autism cured. They're okay with the autism, so even they can sense that their autism is not quite the same as the symptoms. And autisms were autistic 24/7. So why do the symptoms keep coming and going? Shouldn't they be with us still? I'm still autistic. So why don't I have meltdowns anymore? I used to have meltdowns all the time. So why don't I now? There's tons of things I couldn't do in the past, but why can I do them now? So it shows that autism is not static. Right, I continue. I quote, "Autism is a complex neurodevelopmental condition characterized by a wide range of cognitive, behavioral, and communication impairments. It is a spectrum disorder, meaning the symptoms and the severity vary widely among individuals. The gut microbiome is the community of microorganisms, good and bad bacteria, residing in our digestive tract. The healthy balance of these bacteria plays a vital role in digestion, metabolism, immune function, and overall health. The potential link between autism and the microbiome first emerged in the 1990s when parents started reporting changes in their autistic children's behaviour when the children took antibiotics, medication that kills some gut bacteria." End of quote. Now for question this part, it says that the behavioural changes seem to have occurred when they began taking antibiotics. So what if it is something to do with antibiotics for symptoms, but not the autism? What if the autism is genetic, but the symptoms are not? what if the symptoms are to do with the bacteria, as research is showing? It shows that, as I've claimed, that we still don't know what autism is. So trying to cure it actually is a ridiculous goal, since this is illustrating we don't even know what it is. I'll continue. The anecdotal observation sparked an enormous wave of scientific inquiry, leading to dozens of studies suggesting relevant but inconsistent variations in the gut microbial composition of individuals with ASD. Weary of funding further studies that would not remove the needle and possibly add to the confusion, the Simons Foundation Autism Research Initiative, a research program dedicated to unraveling the causes and mechanisms of ASD, decided to act. They hired Dr. Gaspar Taroncha-Oldenburg, at the time an independent scientist, to help make sense of it all and do the landscape analysis of the work that was currently out there on the microbiome and autism, said John Spiro, Senior Vice President and Senior Scientist at SFARI. Taroncha-Oldenburg, now Director of the Therapeutics Alliances at New York University, teamed up with Jamie Morton, a computational biologist and computer scientist, who at the time was a postdoc at the Flatiron Institute, an arm of the Simons Foundation, to advance the research through computational methods. End of quote. Now, in this part, it's still going on, talking about autism traits and so on, and the gut bacteria. And where it mentions anecdotal observations, I've looked at some of those herbal remedies which people are advertising all over the internet, all over Facebook. I've looked at reviews of it, and only some parents say it works, but there's just as many parents saying it doesn't work. They claim that it makes the kids able to talk after a few weeks. So doesn't that suggest that, once again, the non-speaking or limited speaking is a gut problem and not autism, but to do with gut problems? This imbalance of good and bad bacteria. Now, I'll continue. The next heading, a fresh approach to the autism microbiome puzzle. So we're now taking a fresh approach towards that. I quote, most of the studies that have been done in the past around ASD and the microbiome showed little overlap among them, says Taroncha-Oldenburg, and nobody could really point to a specific mechanism. Everybody we talked to would say, maybe it is the immune system, maybe it is the diet, and all of that channeled through the gut. Taroncha tells Euronews Next. It is also widely hypothesized that the immune system plays a significant role in the development of ASD. So we said, okay, we have 10, 15, 20 years of data. Nothing seems to make real sense. But there is something there. What is it? Let's just take a step back and look at it all with a fresh perspective, he remembers. A diverse team of 43 experts from across the globe was assembled to reanalyze 25 previously studied data tests containing microbiome and other omic information, such as diet, immune system response, markers of inflammation, and gene expression profiles in the human brain. But when it came to analysing all these data sets, there was a long list of challenges that had to be overcome, says Morton, such as aggregating the different data across the 25 studies to draw direct comparisons. The scientists certainly looked at more than 25 studies. However, they dedicated almost a year to accessing, cleaning, and curating the data which determined the final pick. Importantly, With each data set and the help of novel and sophisticated algorithms, the team identified the best matched pairs of autistic and neurotypical individuals, individuals without autism, in terms of age and sex, as these are the two major co-founders in the study of the microbiome and autism respectively. The microbiome of a 4-year-old is very different from a 7 from a 10-year-old. And then in terms of autism, there is a dichotomy in terms of incidence between girls and boys, or boys and girls. Research suggests that autism is about 4.2 times more prevalent in boys than girls. Mixing the results from girls and boys would dilute the results. Using this approach, the researchers were able to dramatically increase the number of data points they could analyse. And so instead of taking averages per study, we had a ton of pairs of children, then we aggregated those pairs over all the studies. And that's where the signal really shined, said Morton. The next heading. Did the big assessment determine a relationship between the microbiome and ASD? I quote, the study revealed a connection between the microbiome and various immune genes, as well as connections to microbiome and diet, many of which are tied into putative neurological pathways and neurotransmitters, which are key for brain signalling, Morton told Neuronews Next. And that was the part that kind of shocked me. In other words, the association is real. That is the take-home from our study. The mechanics of it still have to be worked out, said Tarancha Oldenburg. Now, why do they have to be worked out exactly? The big problem among most of the scientific research that goes on is it's all based on statistics, and notice of how they have isolated all of this to just biology, to just what's inside the individual. That's the problem with the medical model. If you allow me to read something from Dr. Gabriel May, a physician, from inside his book. There's a lot of ignorance in the medical model. I quote, don't be so sensitive, people are often told. In other words, don't be so yourself. Genetic vulnerabilities do not code for illness, but they may confer sensitivity for a person being more impacted by life's vicissitudes than someone else with a hardier predisposition. A far from trivial effect. Sensitive people feel more, feel deeply, and are more easily overwhelmed by stress, not just subjectively, but physiologically. Both monkeys and humans, for example, can inherit genes involved in the production of certain brain chemicals such as serotonin that can make them more susceptible to negative experiences, or on the other hand, more amenable to the effect of positive ones. And of course, sensitivity too is a continuum. Genes affect how sensitive one is to environment, and environment affects how relevant one's genetic differences may be. The leading geneticist R.C. Lewontin has said, when an environment changes, all bets are off. Some people will feel more pain and will therefore have greater need to escape into the adaptations that mental illness or addiction represent. They will have more need to tune out, to dissociate, to split into parts, to develop fantasies to account for realities they are unable to endure. But that's a far cry from saying that they have a heritable neurobiological disease. These are the children that Tom Boyce, a professor of pediatrics and psychiatry at the University of California, San Francisco, describes as orchids, exquisitely sensitive to their environment, making them especially vulnerable under conditions of adversity, but unusually vital, creative, and successful within supportive, nurturing environments. The same sensitivity genes that in a stressed environment can help potentiate mental suffering may, under positive circumstances, help promote stronger mental resilience and therefore happiness. Sensitive people have the potential to be more aware, insightful, inventive, artistic, and empathetic if their sensitivity is not crushed by maltreatment or disdain. The most sensitive of our kind have made some of the most lasting cultural contributions. Many of these have also suffered the most intense pains during their lives. Sensitivity can be the quintessential combo package, gift and curse all in one. End of quote. So, just as lots of autistic self-advocates have said, say autism is both a curse and a gift. You know, there's things we don't like about it, but there's also the things we do like about it. All the people suggested to be autistic, neurodivergent in other ways, are all very inventive, enhanced creativity. Autistic people tend to be more over-empathetic, as it mentioned, and that's more to do with sensitivity to the environment. And this is where the social model gets credit, because the social model acknowledges both the outside and what's going on inside, but the medical model only acknowledges what's going on inside, so thinks the disease, as they call that, has got to do something with the inside. It's got to be all based on the genes, and not how the genes interact with the world, not how the genes interact with situations, not with adaptation. But that's what evolution's all about, adaptation. So if someone's adapting for their survival, it shouldn't be seen as a disease or disorder. It's just adaptation. Now I'll continue. I quote, "There was also a huge overlap that was very, very unexpected between microbes associated with autism and those identified in a recent long-term microbiota transplant study that suggested long-term benefits on autism symptoms and gut microbiota from microbiota transfer therapy," says Taronsha Aldenberg. So again, it's the autism symptoms, but not every autistic person faces these symptoms. Non-autistic people face these symptoms, showing it's not specific or universally due to autism, but it's more to do with gut problems, the microbiome, and that imbalance. I continue. The original FMT study did show an improvement in the symptoms in these autistic children, and then our study provided more evidence on why that could be the case, he notes. And back to what I read from Dr. Gavin Mate's book, where it mentioned genes being causing more susceptible to certain things. It could be the mutations which have been seen in autistic individuals that make them more susceptible to the gut problems, that have been more sensitive to the environment. So it's not necessarily, after all, they do say it's not 100% genetic autism. It can't be, because identical twins are 100% identical genetically, but only one of them's autistic, the other one's not. So there must be some other factor besides genes. I continue. The new assessment study does not demonstrate that the microbiome causes autism or anything like that, Spira added. It does demonstrate a statistical correlation between altered microbiome and autism, but the direction of causality is still not clear. So we still don't know the causes, even from this research. We also don't say we have a list of bugs, and in fact this is something that we very much and vehemently avoided, says Tarantja Oldenburg, because maybe it's not the microbes that are important, but the genes they contain and the functions they are performing. So again, what functions, how are the genes interacting with the environment? So it's more to do with a person's experience in the environment shown further, and not something necessarily inherited. So it's not actually a disease in and of itself, which might explain why one twin can be autistic and the other one maybe not. It still could be the case that microbiome dysregulation is due to, for example, dietary preferences of people on the autism spectrum who tend to be very picky eaters, said Morton. Next heading. A new discipline paving the way for a new era. I quote, "Moving forward, Tarantja Oldenburg and Morton's reassessment will set the groundwork for a very powerful analytic way of asking these questions and trying to decide what's the most appropriate computational approach to take a look at these really complex data sets," says Spira. "This study required more than 100 times more computational power compared to most microbiome studies," says Morton. "This is not something you can do with a spreadsheet on your desktop," added Tarantja Oldenburg. "However, the future of research demands more than just advanced computer science. There needs to be a new discipline because computer science alone is not enough," says Morton. "These systems are so complex that you need AI coupled with statistics, coupled with biology, to pave a new infrastructure and distill its complexity. But the community is, finally, going through an acceptance that the microbiome might be influencing who we are to a really great extent, and that it might be as important as our own genes," Tarantja Oldenburg notes. End of quote. Now, I'd like you to take notice of that last paragraph of the article, which I'll link in the description. "But the community is, finally, going through an acceptance that the microbiome might be influencing who we are to a really great extent, and that it might be as important as our own genes." So, influencing who we are. And autistic people, so many, have said they see their autism as an integral part of their identity. They can sense that their autism, or in this case, this gut problem, is part of who they are. I certainly feel that my autism determines so much about me, both the things I like and the things I dislike. So, as from the book, it is the package of, it's a gift and a curse. It's both. You know, there's the positives to it, but there's also the negative side. So, the neurodiversity movement is not romanticising autism or any other neurodivergent disability. It's simply pointing out that all these disabilities are a gift and a curse. You know, they are both, due to the sensitivity to the environment. Before we had all these irrelevant stimulants around us, we didn't seem to have all these issues going on today. So it shows that as you've designed the environment, the design of the environment does not suit specific genes, gene variation. So all of this research sounds rather promising on reducing the negative symptoms. You know, the things like too sensitive to lights and sounds. You know, things like not being able to speak. Because also, if you clean that gut out again, that makes the individuals able to speak according to the reviews I've read. about these herbal remedies, about all these powders. But now I'm going to go on to the cons about these powders, capsules and so on, from another article. The article's titled, Probiotic Supplements May Do the Opposite of Boosting Your Gut Health. So, they may boost your health temporarily, but not permanently. They can actually have negative effects in the long run. And I can testify of this due to my own experience with medications. So, this by Anahad O'Connor, the author is called. I've mentioned about the autism industrial complex before, that there's numerous industries profiteering off of autism. And this is one of the very first things mentioned. I quote, Probiotic supplements have grown into a multi-billion-dollar industry, spurred by claims that the products will populate your gut with bacteria that can boost your health in numerous ways. But beware of the hype. In healthy people, probiotic supplements offer little benefit, and they can potentially do more harm than good. Studies show that taking probiotic supplements for overall health or to counter the effects of antibiotics can alter the composition of your microbiome and reduce the levels of microbial diversity in your gut, which is linked to a number of health problems. So all this messing about with the gut that we're planning on doing is actually the cause for later down the line in the individual's life. It's going to cause other health problems. I'll continue. Probiotic supplements come in the form of capsules, gummies, powders, and pills that contain live microorganisms believed to boost gut health. There is a subset of people who may benefit from taking them, including people with gastrointestinal ailments. So we're coming back to the gut problem, the gut part, and this part confesses there's a subset. So not every autistic person can actually benefit from these. Studies have found that probiotic supplements can reduce symptoms of irritable bowel syndrome and inflammatory bowel disease. They can prevent travelers' diarrhea and reduce some side effects of antibiotic medications. But for most people, more reliable ways are available to nourish your gut microbiome. So there are better ways than all these things advertised on Facebook. All these 5-in-1 is one of the titles, where they actually tell lies that even though all these powders and so on are about gut problems, the advertisements go saying it's about autism, right? It's a cure to autism. But as we've already pointed out, not all autistic people have gut problems, and as pointed out here, it only works on a subset of people. The reviews I've read about these gummies and so on, just as many parents say it doesn't work as those who say it does. So this backs up further that it's not universally to do with autism. First, eat a variety of vegetables, nuts, seeds, beans and whole grains, which provide gut microbes the fibre-rich fuel that they need to thrive. Researchers have found that eating fermented foods such as yogurt, which contain probiotics and other beneficial compounds, have positive effects on your health and gut microbiome. Your gut microbes are part of a vast ecosystem of bacteria, viruses, archaea and fungi located largely in your colon. People who harbour diverse gut microbiomes tend to age more healthfully and develop fewer diseases. These microbes thrive on the fibre found in fruits and vegetables. turning it into new compounds or postbiotics, including butyrate and other short-chain fatty acids that appear to be exceptionally good for your health. But like residents of any community, the microbes in your gut can work together and compete against one another. Sometimes the proportion of good and bad bacteria in your gut can get out of balance, a condition known as dysbiosis. But taking concentrated doses of a few strains of bacteria can upset the balance in your gut, said Lorenzo Cohen, a professor and director of the Integrative Medicine Program at the University of Texas MD Anderson Cancer Center in Houston. You can inadvertently create a form of dysbiosis by having too much of a good thing, he said. You're not only crowding out the bad things, but crowding out the other good things that you want in there to create high microbiome diversity. So, it's the bad bacteria that overgrows inside these gut problems associated with ASD. So, by wiping all that out, not only are you wiping out the bad bacteria, you're also wiping out of it the things that you need. So, keep doing that repetitively. Wiping it out, you're only making the individual more and more and more susceptible to other problems. For example, if I take my medication as an example, my medication has the pro of reducing and controlling my epileptic seizures, but anti-epileptic drugs suppress brain activity. So the more doses I take 2 a day, but then as the dosage increases, the more they increase it, the more it suppresses my brain activity. So my brain won't be as active the more I take. So if I take too much of them, go above the maximum dosages, it's going to shut some things in my brain right off. Such as, for example, due to the medication I take, due to how it interacts inside, it's had an effect on my sleep, and it's caused me short-term memory loss. But I can struggle to remember just 5 words. I've got to keep repeating it until it crosses into my long-term memory. I've struggled short-term wise, and so on, and that's because of medications. And that's where I mentioned the problem about the medical model is it treats organisms in an isolated way. And by doing so, it immediately cuts off our interconnected state. So we are not being trained by the medical model in the way things work in the real world. And that's why there's always cons, because it is not 100% accurate altogether, because they're not treating an interconnected system, they're treating an isolated one, and that's not the way it works in the real world. Right. I continue. It's common for people to take probiotics alongside antibiotic medications. Antibiotics treat bacterial infections, but they can also wipe out beneficial bacteria. The idea behind taking a probiotic supplement with an antibiotic is to rebalance the gut microbiome and minimize side effects. Studies have shown, for example, that probiotics can prevent antibiotic-associated diarrhea. But one study of probiotic use with antibiotics produced surprising results. Researchers at the Institute of Science recruited healthy adults and gave them a week-long course of antibiotics. Then one group took a popular probiotic supplement for 4 weeks that contained at least 10 species of bacteria. Another group received stool transplants containing their own gut microbes which were collected before the antibiotics were administered, a third group served as the control. The microbiomes of people in the control group returned to normal about 3 weeks after taking the antibiotics. The microbiomes of people who received the stool transplants after the antibiotic treatment fared the best, returning to the normal within days. But the microbiomes of people who took the probiotics had not returned to normal even after 5 months. The scientists found that they also had less gut microbiome diversity compared to people in the control or transplant group. Now, different effects in different people, as treatments will affect everyone with variation, as variation is the rule. So I'll continue. In another recent clinical trial, scientists at Stanford recruited adults with metabolic syndrome, a combination of risk factors for type 2 diabetes, such as abdominal obesity, high blood pressure, and high triglycerides, and then split them into 2 groups. One was given a probiotic containing several strains of bacteria thought to be good for metabolic and digestive health. The second group did not take probiotics and served as the controls. After 18 weeks, the scientists found that some people taking the probiotic supplement had improvements in their blood pressure, but others in the probiotic group showed a worsening of their blood sugar and insulin levels. The researchers say that differences in diet could have played a role in the results, but it's not clear. The findings underscore that probiotic supplements can have very different effects in different people, said Erika Sonnenberg, an author of the study and senior research scientist in microbiology and immunology at Stanford. It's a common theme, she added. Probiotics can be beneficial for some individuals, but it also seems that for some individuals, they can make things worse. Okay, so we're near the end of it now. I'll continue. So what should you do? If you've been prescribed an antibiotic or you have a digestive ailment, you should talk to your doctor about whether it makes sense for you to take a probiotic supplement, and if so, which brand or product. You may be advised to skip probiotics altogether if you have a severe illness or compromised immune system because of the risk of developing an infection. Some doctors might recommend adding fermented foods to your diet instead of taking a supplement. When I do recommend live microbes, it's often in the context of fermented foods, said Chris Damon, a gastroenterologist at the Digestive Health Center at the University of Washington Medical Center. Fermented foods are like nature's probiotics. One of the benefits of fermented foods is that they typically contain not just probiotics, but also prebiotics and postbiotics. In a study published in the journal Cell, Sonnenberg and her colleagues at Stanford found that assigning people to eat fermented foods every day over a 10-week period lowered their levels of inflammation and increased their gut microbiome diversity. If you're new to fermented foods, Damon recommended introducing them gradually. I don't take a probiotic, but I do eat a variety of fermented foods, and that's generally the advice I give people, Damon said. End of the article. I said, overall, I would like to conclude to advise you that if you're going to consume any of these herbal remedies, whether it's gummies, powder, liquid form, capsules, if you're going to try putting these down your kids' throats, trying to get your kids to consume them, make sure you actually talk with your doctor first and say, is this medication suitable for your kids? For example, lots of autistic individuals, well, I've never come across one who doesn't have another disability, comorbid disability, anything like epilepsy is very common among the autism spectrum, for example. So if your kids are consuming some other form of medication, medications and herbal remedies can interact with each other and cause devastating effects. But if you're not a specialist in medicine, you won't quite know, well, what effect could that have. So it's important that you actually find a medicine specialist, a doctor. For I'm not a medicine specialist, but from my experience with medication myself that I consume, when I took melatonin and one called lamotrigine at the same time, it made me have nightmares. But once I separated them and made a several hour interval between consuming them, those nightmares stopped. So those two medications were interacting with each other. So if your child's on medication, be more cautious. If your child does not have gut problems but is just said to be autistic, don't feel the need to go down into this. Remember, as I read the first article which said this was groundbreaking research, groundbreaking revolution, remember it said that so much about the gut microbiome is actually greatly determines who we are. So if you're going to change that, you're going to change who your child is. And as a bit more evidence that these are gut problems and not autism, is where I mentioned the read reviews about these, and so many parents saying it worked on the kids. It tends to typically be the ones who had non-speaking children. The girl saying things like, oh, my child never stops talking now. You know, my child's a conversationalist and never stopped talking. The girl saying, but isn't that the way autistic people communicate naturally? On the diagnostic criteria for autism, doesn't it say difficulty with back and forth conversations? The way they describe their children behaving afterwards, and so on, is exactly how autistic people communicate and interact. And that supports the double empathy problem which I've discussed before. So, both the double empathy problem, it tends to be more to do with that autism's more of a different communication and interaction style, not lack of communication, not lack of interaction. This difficulty with speaking and so on tends to be more related to gut problems. So like I said, we still don't know what autism is. But my overall theory is that autism is more of a condition of authenticity. I'll discuss my theory on an alternative episode. But altogether, it seems that the negative effects that are associated with autism are more to do with gut problems and not the autism itself. So we shouldn't be targeting the autism. We can research the autism, but we don't want to be targeting it for eradication. And we should do more research on the gut problems, since that's actually what's making these negative, impactful symptoms occur. So I would say that just like autistic people have been saying since the autistic self-advocacy movement, neurodiversity advocates since the neurodiversity movement began, we shouldn't just go curing it. Right? It's not the autism that needs to be cured. They need accommodation and better support. I don't know anyone among neurodiversity advocates who would disagree of solving gut problems of rebalancing bacteria. I don't know any neurodiversity activist who would protest against that. I don't know any neurodiversity activist who would protest against I being treated for epilepsy. So the neurodiversity movement is not entirely against the medical model. It wants the medical model and social model to intersect together. If we think about biodiversity, life in general, say if we think about trees for example, when a tree is in an environment that doesn't suit its needs, it slows down in its growth. It stops growing, and it goes back to the fundamentals, to the roots of itself, and nurtures the roots. So if someone's gut's not in an ideal position, it's going to slow the brain development down. It's going to slow down development. So if we do actually help with the gut problem, that would enable brain development. Enable brain development would enable speech development. Enabling brain development would enable the motor skills. And by giving them a suitable environment that nurtures their needs, fulfills them, that would enable development even more. It would be less traumatizing, no autism cured, and we would still have all the enhanced creativity, all the inventions that have been made by disabled people. And we don't have to go back to performing velvet eugenics, doing a disguised version of the Nazi Holocaust. Because wanting to eradicate autism, eradicate ADHD, eradicate Down syndrome, eradicate bipolar, eradicate this, that, what you're basically saying is you're basically doing what the Nazis were doing. The Nazis were eliminating legitimate groups of people who they categorised, and they wanted to eliminate that group from the human race altogether. And that's basically what they want to do with CRISPR. They've categorised everyone into, oh, you've got Down syndrome, so you go here, oh, we'll eliminate, we won't allow this group to be born, oh, you've got the autistic biomarkers, oh, we're not going to let you be born on our species, you don't belong here. So it actually is a form of genocide. So I hope I don't see CRISPR, gene editing, or biotechnology being used in such an abusive way. Because that is actually the suggestion for premature extinction. If you found this video interesting about the gut and microbiome, I will be following the research, doing more about it, but I advise you to do some of your own research if you would like to learn more. If you found this interesting, please hit like, hit subscribe, so that more people can learn. If you have any questions, you can put them in the comments section. If you made it this far, thank you for listening.